Hi, my name is Charlie Martinez, and you're watching Management Considerations for Producers in a Volatile Environment. In light of the recent COVID-19 pandemic that's taken its toll on the Southeast region, across the country and around the globe, economists around the country decided we should get together and work on producing material for our producers that they can use currently or in the current environment and also in the future moving forward. I'm Charlie Martinez. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee, specializing in farm and financial management. Today, my partner on this video is Dr. Kenny Burdine with the University of Kentucky. Kenny, if you would just kind of fill the people in on who you are and what you do, and we'll get this thing rolling.
Yeah, morning, Charlie. Good to be with you. My name is Kenny Burdine. I'm associate professor at the University of Kentucky, focused mostly in livestock management and marketing. So looking forward to talking about some things producers can be thinking about right now in a tough market.
Well, I guess the first topic on the line is for those people that are having a fall calf crop or had a fall calf crop and they're getting ready to start weaning and start thinking about weaning. What are some things you're telling them to do during this time?
Yeah, that's definitely a key question. And one of the questions I've been getting a lot is, I've got calves that were born in the fall. They're about to be weaned sometime in the next few weeks. And the question that I'm getting is, does it make sense to keep those calves longer than usual? The notion being it gives this market some time to kind of adjust and find an equilibrium. So right now I'm showing you weekly price data. This is actually through last week. So I'll get a new report here sometime by middle of the morning, I think. So this doesn't include this past week. Okay. But you can see the volatility. You can see the huge drop in prices for really the first 3 weeks of March. And then last week had a nice little run up. Given what the board's done the last few days and how the market's open early this week, we're going to be down again. So there's just been a lot of volatility. So, generally speaking, it makes sense to think about, what can I do to work through this environment? I want to kind of start about thinking about this, but just looking at what a typical pattern is. So the blue line you're looking at there is 2020. So that's kind of the current monthly prices. I want to look at the black line, which is the previous 9 years, 2010 to 2018. And the first point I want to make is that seasonally speaking, calf prices tend to increase from the first of the year until about April when grass comes on. So seasonality is actually working with us right now. The other thing is, short-term retained ownership programs on calves, and that can be growing them on grass or growing feed of some type. Oftentimes makes sense because you improve the health of the calves, you add some additional weight, and it fits within what a lot of us do here in the Southeast. So when we think about something like that, I guess the first thing that I would say is that on these calves, grazing demand is going to impact their value. I don't think calves have been hit as hard as the heavy feeder cattle have. And it's simply because we've got, grass coming on as we speak. We'll have folks that are going to be full on grazing here in the next few weeks in Kentucky, probably a little sooner in the south there, Charlie. And that's going to support these calf values. If you can grow calves for a period of time this spring on grass, that's just some very inexpensive gain. You're going to end up flipping those pastures anyway, probably early summer. So the cost of doing that is so small. So you can add some pretty inexpensive pounds. And it's that almost always works well in a market environment. And even if you have to dry lot those calves, I would push the pencil. But I always like to tell people that there are people that do nothing more than buy these green wean calves and background them for a period of time and then resell them as feeders. So that's a segment of the market that generally is profitable. If I'm a cow-calf operator, the most profitable group of calves that I can, background or stock are oftentimes the one I produce myself because, health costs are lower. I don't have to pay commission twice and things like that. So generally speaking, I guess I would just say that I think this makes sense as long as it's part of you. Now, a more complicated question that I've been getting is for folks that have been, moving heavy cattle that have got, say, 800-pound steers that are basically ready to sell right now.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, they're the ones in the Southeast that have been hit the hardest by this market drop because we don't have very many feed yards and so forth in the Southeast. So they've been hit the hardest, I think. If you look at what the Fed Cattle Board has done, it obviously dropped sharply through about the second week of March, actually bounced up the last 2 weeks. But, we're recording this, Charlie, on the morning of April 4th. Market's not even open yet on the board. And, we're coming off of 2 limit down days on both feeder cattle and live cattle futures. So, those prices are not going to be able to hold certainly the current week or probably next week. A lot of volatility on 8 weights too. It's hard to estimate or guess what those cattle are actually worth right now in the Southeast. I'm going to do the best that I can, but understand the market volatility both on live cattle board and feeder cattle makes this really, really tough. I mentioned we were coming off of 2 limit down movements on the live cattle futures board. So, the best I can do is just kind of give you, okay, Kenny, if you had to just estimate what a retained ownership program might look like right now, what would it be? And that's been the question that I've really been getting is, I don't want to take the loss on these heavy feeders. Would it make sense for me to just keep them, ship them out west, put them on a retained ownership program, custom feed them, and then sell them sometime in the fall? And I think the reason I get questions like this is mostly because it's a tendency to want to kind of delay that loss, if that makes sense. And the first thing I would say is that, when you do that, really what you're doing, the cattle are worth what they're worth. So you've lost that money on the backgrounding program, and you're really just kind of rolling that loss into a finishing program. So the first thing to understand is you're not, you're really just kind of delaying taking that loss and kind of hoping things improve in the next few months.
Right.
So, my best guess, I got a fall live cattle board in the upper 80s. Now that's a crazy drop from where it was a month ago even.
Right.
So, I do try to think about that in some perspective. Is that really what we're going to see come fall? Basis
we're so far away right now.
I know it's just so hard. This market's moving so fast. Most anything that we do is honestly just an educated guess, and one can argue about how educated it is, I guess. As well.
If they're calling us educated.
Yeah. But basis has been strong. So
right.
I'm going to work off of a fall price around $1, but we all know that's going to move. If I had been doing this early in the week, I would have put an 850-pound steer, Charlie, at about $1.20. But given what I've seen this week, I'm going to climb about $1.10. But to be honest with you, there were some around $1.20 early in the week. There were some that didn't see $1 this past couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's just the market's just all over the place.
Right.
To keep it simple, I'm going to talk about basically 3 pounds of gain per day over 183 days, and I'm just doing that to get that 850 to about 1,400 pounds, just kind of a ballpark finished weight. Using some data out of Texas that some friends of mine put together a couple weeks ago, I'm going to use a 75-cent per pound cost of gain, and that's feed, that's vet medicine, that's marketing, and that's yardage. That's kind of meant to be my cost in the retained ownership program. I'm also going to figure a 2% death loss and figure 5% interest. I kind of look what that budget looks like. If I use that dollar price, and that's a guess, but if I use that dollar price on that 1,400-pound steer, he's worth about $400. That one's pretty easy. Buying the 8 weight at $1.10 puts him worth about $9.35. Now, I've been a little bit surprised that shipping costs haven't dropped some with diesel prices.
Right.
They may over time, Charlie. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm still running that at about $3.50. I heard anything from low 3s to up. Actually, I got a quote the other day for a little over $4, which kind of surprised me.
Well, even if you wanted to cancel that as a zero, you're still only taking off $35.
Exactly. I mean, it's $3.50. You're not making a big difference on the budget.
Right.
That is a cost sometimes people forget when they think about retained ownerships. I've got to ship them out there, and that can be fairly expensive. I'm using 600 miles, but depending on where you're going with them, it can vary quite a bit. Putting on 549 pounds, which again just gets my 850 steer to about 1,400, 75 cents a pound of gain, $412. I got $10 in there for miscellaneous costs that come up. Again, I'm charging 5% interest and 2% death loss. But just kind of that snapshot, if that's what we're just going to kind of simply talk about, I'm showing some red ink.
Right.
Now, if I take that same thing and then try to put it on kind of a sensitivity basis, and this is maybe the most important thing that I'm going to talk about, is just how much difference what I sell those fed steers for this fall and what it actually cost me to put that gain on is going to impact that bottom line. So notice that center cell there, that's that $100 per hundredweight or $1 a pound fed cattle price, and that's that 75 cents per pound cost of gain is exactly where my budget was before, losing roughly 47 bucks. I guess the point that I would simply make here is twofold. Number one, there's a tendency for, I think, any producer to want to delay taking a loss like they've had on these heavy feeders, and I fully get that. But understand, in reality, you're kind of speculating on this fed cattle market come fall if you do that. So just understand you are taking a risk by doing that. And what we really need, if I'm reasonably close on what that 8 weight's worth right now, what I really need is I need this fed cattle market to get, a fair amount better than it's expected,
Yeah.
in the next, few months. And just, so kind of understand, you're really just kind of shifting from one risk to another. But this is a pretty good table in terms of understanding. If I do value that 850-pound steer at $1.10 right now, and the other assumptions are right, this shows me how sensitive that return is to both fed cattle price and to those cost of gain measures. So,
Kenny, looking at this chart itself, there's obviously a lot more red than there is black on this chart. Would you recommend that if you haven't done this route before, probably take some real thought, put some real thought into it? If you don't know how your cattle are going to perform, you have no history of knowing. I think that increases your chances of hitting the red more than the black.
that's
I mean,
a great point.
You're basically, like you said, you're kind of just hoping that the cash price increases. That has the most impact on your bottom line in this chart. So I would think you'd agree that, if you haven't done it before and you really don't know what your cattle are going to do, probably risky decision to do this.
It absolutely is, and that's a good point. I didn't really make. I'm definitely glad you did, but I'm assuming 2% death loss, right? But you could lose more than that. Obviously, that there's a risk there. Cattle performance really comes in two different ways. Well, three, I guess. There's the health for starters, right? There's the conversion, which impacts that cost of gain there on the left side, right? And then, frankly, we're also kind of ignoring the fact that, there's maybe a market price, but there's also a function of how good those cattle actually are, right? What if they don't grade well? What if they don't produce good yield grades? So there's maybe even more risk, like you say, Charlie, than what this actual chart actually shows. So again, if you choose to do that, I think it's going to be important that you know the quality of the cattle that you have,
Mm-hmm.
and that you understand the risk that you're taking, and also understand with the board where it's at. I'm actually being, I'm kind of using a higher price than the board,
Yeah.
which means I can't lock in anything in the black here right now, which
Right.
is a key thing. I really am betting on things improving. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, more risk and more stress watching the board.
So Charlie, I love talking about cattle, that, but what are some things that you're talking to your producer in Tennessee about that maybe aren't in the cattle business?
Yeah, I think a perfect segue in the first topic that needs to be talked about is something that cattle producers and non-cattle producers can utilize. Of course, COVID-19 has brought a lot of doom and gloom, but I think one key thing that everybody's kind of talked about, hinted about, I've seen it posted on Facebook, people bragging about how much they're paying at the pumps. I think diesel prices are an opportunity for a lot of producers. I pulled up the weekly data from EIA, the most current we can get for 2020 against the 2019 year, and as you can see there, we're kind of the darker blue line in 2020, and we're trending downwards as compared to where 2019 was. And some people are like, well, why is that? There's two kind of reasons for that. One is the demand of it. People aren't moving around as much, but something that's not talked about a lot in the news, in rightfully so because we're in a pandemic. But there's actually a conflict occurring between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And, as long as that continues, we're probably going to keep trending this way. And once that's being resolved, we're probably not going to be trending this way anymore. I think our early 2000s was the last time that there was any stagnant, low side to the oil market. So I don't anticipate this to be staying this low. And so if you're a producer and you got a way to store diesel, I think this is a perfect opportunity to go out and store it, lock it in, because I don't foresee this staying low this long. Because as we all know, everything can change when we wake up in the morning on these oil and diesel prices, and especially gasoline prices also. So that's one of the key things. As we move more towards the crop side of things, I think this is a perfect time for producers to analyze their worst fields and think about alternatives for that field this year. And then I kind of, talking with my colleague, Dr. Aaron Smith, kind of came up with 4 things that, we want producers to be thinking about. Make sure you have planting equipment ready to roll and that capacity is sufficient to plant in a tight window. Make sure, we never know what's going to happen if someone gets sick at your retailer or wherever you get your equipment. What happens if someone gets sick with coronavirus there? Possibly going to shut down that store for you. So kind of think about, do I need to get some planting equipment that if this breaks, I can't plant? what do I need? Think in terms of that. If you got extra cash laying around, that'd be another good way of utilizing it. The second one, identify fields that can be planted earlier, and then figure out the logistics of moving equipment, moving people around. Because of that, because we got to be careful with social distancing. That's one of the key things. How are we going to move everything around? Some roads might not be open. So you might have to worry about getting around certain things. 3, get in touch with your input suppliers to make sure that they're able to make deliveries as scheduled with no disruptions due to this COVID-19. Kind of mentioned in that first point, what happens if your supplier gets sick, but also what if something happens, locally with whoever's delivering your stuff, same kind of thing. Think about what are alternatives. How can you get your equipment if that was to occur? And then 4, separate functions to limit social interactions on these large farms. If you're a large farm, it might be smart to keep one guy on one piece of equipment as long as you can to limit any kind of interaction between them, kind of increase your probability of not getting COVID-19 or spreading it around. Obviously, most governors are saying, being outside, getting some fresh air is a good thing, and that's okay. But we also still got to keep in mind that this is, they're employees, they're on the job. As of now, if you're still functioning, that's great. Let's just try to, we got to decrease our chances of spreading COVID-19 amongst your employees. And then we kind of put in a bullet point here, specifically for Tennessee, but this applies to anybody that's kind of been going through some super above normal rainfall, who's been getting that. You got to pray that these fields start drying out. Right now, our fields are pretty wet here in Tennessee specifically, but I know in other states and neighboring states, it's also wet and they can't get in. So let's hope that this starts occurring, so we can get in and actually move, across the start line and start getting things going. And hopefully, if they've also done their job and due diligence and done good practice, they can make money on the back end of this thing. Another common question that's kind of started coming up was, what is the COVID-19 implications on the H2A Labor Program? And here at UTIA, we did a worksheet or a handout, and it's labeled there on the bottom, updates on the H2A program in the midst of COVID-19. And we wrote this when this was written by the folks in our program, in our institute. There was no waiver yet. And last week, at the time of this recording, the State Department went ahead and said, hey, we know that this is crucial for our producers, especially in the specialty crops and kind of fruit sector. And they said, hey, we need to be able to tell them there's certainty on this program. So we're going to waive the in-person interview. But there are some stipulations that people haven't really talked about. And so we went ahead and listed the six stipulations that allow someone to be waived for the in-person interview. The first one is that the worker must have held an H2A visa within the last 2 years. This is up to 1 year. They must have had no illegal presence since 1997. Keep in mind, we're talking about 1997. We're not talking about 2007, 2000. We're talking about 1997. And by illegal presence means that the individual did not stay in the U.S. without legal documentation. They must not have been arrested or convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude. Keep in mind, though, like a traffic ticket, moving violation, that doesn't count as moral turpitude, so you're okay. The next one is that they should not have been arrested, or they could not have been arrested for an alcohol-related offense such as a DUI, DWI within the last 5 years. Kind of stipulation that's attached to this one is that keyword last 5 years. Probably the last part of the sentence, unless they have received clearance from a panel physician since the arrest, probably applies more to the people that are the year 3, year 4, year 5, where they've, stuff is kind of, time has gone on a little bit. But still, if they have not even had that panel physician clearance, then they're not eligible for the waiver. And then the fifth bullet point down there is they've not been granted a waiver of ineligibility in the past, which means that the workers that have to interview and apply for a waiver every year will not be able to come for these to do those interviews, and that the workers have held a H2A visa, have never held a H2A visa, but fulfill requirements 2 through 5. And so, that offers opportunity for some people that say, hey, I can go find work. I qualify. I've never done anything wrong. I want to work. I'm willing and able. Those kind of people are able to go out and obtain a H2A visa. So, those are my thoughts that have stuff to do with, non-cattle things. But some final thoughts wrapping this up. The retained ownership scenarios are general in a sense. And if you have further questions, I would definitely, say reach out to Dr. Burdine. But keep in mind, it's kind of what we mentioned. It's, it's general. We've made some assumptions. You're taking a risk if you don't know how your cattle are going to perform. And so, but if you want to go that route and you want to have, some kind of budget to try to help bolster your argument for yourself or whoever you're wanting to talk through it with, I know Dr. Burdine would be more than happy to do that for you. And I think, talking about the opportunities that, this is a doom and gloom, but there is opportunities. I think diesel prices are plenty right now. At the time of this recording, it's a great time to try to lock that up. I said that in numerous settings. I've said it in numerous interviews and talking to people. So I wanted to make sure that drum gets pounded on this program. And then kind of getting back just what we just talked about, the H2A program. It's still going to be useful moving forward. As long as you've had good people, most people are, utilize this program. They're still going to be there and be viable in terms of labor supply. And if you have any more questions on any of these things that we've talked about, you can reach me or Kenny either by phone or by our email. And if you're on Twitter, we've included our Twitter handles. And if you've made it this far, we appreciate you even getting this far. Kenny, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I'm just going to wrap up by saying that I've enjoyed doing this, and we're both in the same, shoes. We're trying to find new ways to reach folks when we can't be face to face right now. So, reach out to us, give us some feedback, let us know what questions you have, and we'll look forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you.